Thank you and welcome to another Sunday Trialogues. I'm with my co-hosts, Ricardo and Ethan. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
So, good evening. To me, it is at least. So, good day to everyone that is on other timelines. My name is Ricardo Calvario. I'm a multidisciplinary researcher. And basically, that's it. You can find me at what is on the screen at Ricardo Calvario 1 at X. And check out my link for the Institute for Natural Philosophy over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ethan.
Peace on earth, you guys. My honor to be here with you guys once again, and hello to everyone. I'm an author and philosopher. I'm a researcher of various things that I get obsessed with, and on the esoteric and the exoteric. And it is my honor to be here with both of you guys. You guys are doing amazing things. So
Likewise.
This is our fourth one, right? So I'm
Yes,
obsessed
It
with
is.
that's with four, so I celebrate that.
Sure. Only 96 to the 100.
Right. Well, so here we are. What kind of topics do we have trending around in you guys' minds? Let's go with you, Ethan. Let's go with you first. What kind of topic you got for us today?
Well, I have one, but I was first last week, I think.
Oh, okay, you were. Go ahead, Ricardo.
Good pass. Good pass. So before I begin, I just want to thank the person that sent me a beautiful image of a coffee and my book, The Resonant Earth, on the table. So thank you very much for that. I'm touched. Now, I'm going to make some very simple questions that have very difficult answers. So I will start with this, that people ask, that is, why is there pain and suffering? What happened when we die? And I wish to turn these questions into something more interesting. That is, let me see my notes. So why is there bliss, happiness, and pleasure, for instance? I don't see people asking that. Why are we born? Where do souls come from? Right? And I think if we look into this thing and we go to this new technology that allows us to see that spark of light that happens when the sperm enters the egg and life is created, because the spark only happens when it's viable. Does this have some significance? For instance, the Torah tells us that the soul only enters the body 40 days before birth. Yet we see this spark, this igniting of light happening when the sperm enters the egg. So my question is, do you think that the Torah is more close to the truth, or that is this spark of light is what happens when the metaphysical enters the physical reality, when the element that is our soul enters something physical to develop, right? So I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson saying that he has proof that there is no soul, because science has studied the brain when people have strokes, and the brain gets affected, and if it has multiple strokes or a big one, you start losing your faculties depending on the area of the brain that is affected. You can lose your voice, you can lose your movements on the left side, you can lose the movements on the right side, until you get to the point that only the motor functions are working, meaning your heart is beating, you're alive, but there's nothing there. So this is his argument for no soul. Not his, he says that science argument to why there is no soul. So to this I say, how can they be so ignorant of their own disciplines? Because the brain is a receptor of electromagnetic energies, and it functions by electromagnetic pulses that work at very little speeds. People think that the thought in the brain is very quickly. It isn't. It is very slow. The way that electricity goes past is slow motion. So it's a miracle that we can articulate a speech or even try to rationalize, because our brains, the electricity that rules our brains is very slow. Moreover, I've said it many times, when I do this to my arm, my brain only receives the information that I'm doing this to my arm a little fraction of a second after I initiate my movement, which means that there is something before that. So there is something that is acknowledged by the body before the brain can tell the body this is happening. I'm probably making this a lot of confusing, but to me it's quite simple. So I will pass the word to you now. What are your ideas in terms of what is the moment where the spiritual enters the flesh, and how do you see all this?
Well, I think from the Greek perspective, there's a lot of talk of this eros, right? And I think from what I've gathered, that this eros is the idea of where all good and evil come from. So, if the universe is made up of this kind of love, right? This kind of unlimited, unconditional love, well, then that's why you would have evil in the world, is because it's unconditional. So the unconditional love would be the idea of, for you so loved physical form that you entered into this body and you chose to have a physical experience, right? For you so loved the world that you came into the place and you chose it. And somehow this formlessness of the infinite came into a physical form that is, far below the potential of an infinite formless being. And so making that choice is how we got there. And a good example of this is when the Greeks were talking about the love that uh, Orpheus had for Eurydice. So he not only went into the underworld to rescue her from death out of love, but he also turned around to make sure that she was still there in opposition to what the gods had told him out of love. So it was not only the bravery of going down there to save her, but also the mistake that he made at the very end. Those are both out of love. And so if all things arise out of love, that kind of makes sense. Good, evil, all the rest of it. It's because this place is made of unconditional love, and you can tap into that love anytime you want to, if you really want to. And, once you get to the point of clear understanding of this place, it feels like total and unconditional love, which would make sense because all the rest of it comes down to this idea of these desires. And they always put Aphrodite above all the rest of the gods in terms of closest to fate, because what you love is eventually your fate. You could see this idea in, the addictions we have and all the rest of it too. Her chains, the chains of Aphrodite, are the chains that bind every beast, no matter how big. It's all about this love and desire, and that goes into a little bit of a Buddhist concept, because it's this desire that a lot of Buddhists are trying to stop in their own lives so that they could have a more richer existence without the desire. But I think if you're going to really boil the whole thing down, I'd say that it's this idea of love, even if it's a simulation, right? Somebody had to love it enough to create it. And I think that's something that's missing when you look at this idea of the machine world. I don't know if machines can love. Maybe they're not to that point, or maybe we haven't seen it yet, or maybe it's being expressed in different ways, but they're made of infinite love too. Maybe we'll see in the future, but I think for now, that's what you can really use to determine what is or isn't human, is by testing that thing to see if it has love. Because if you can find it in a machine, maybe you've got an argument, but right now I don't see it,
Well, I would say I will try to respond to you using two rather unrelated things. First of one, first of all, as you described it, I was seeing the life path of Luke Skywalker. Sorry, of Anakin Skywalker. I'm sorry, because Anakin reached to the point that it reached, always trying to do good. The problem is trying to prevent the bad. Every single person in mythology and in folk tales, they're trying to prevent the bad, and because of their prevention they cause the bad, because if they didn't, the bad wouldn't happen. It is out of love that even the balance of the galaxy came into stake, right?
Right.
In second place, when you say um, machines can love, I will go to the Matrix and to the definition that the machines give of love. When he's talking to the father of Satine, he says, "What is love? Can you define it? Life is but electrochemistry in your brain spreading pheromones to your body that leads to the belief of a sensation that people hang on to." So if we considered that our bodies are biomachines, then we have also to assume that all of these emotions are but a roller coaster in an amusement park. Like Bill Hicks says, it's all a ride, right? It goes up and down, twisting and around, but it's just a ride. So I think that anything can manifest love, because love is not something that is given, but is something that is perceived by those that feel it, right? So people, there are people. Do you heard my daughters pass this to, and there is a new kind of baby, a toy. It's baby born or whatever is the name, and people are taking this plastic babies to hospital emergencies. I'm not kidding. Seriously, I'm not kidding, right? They're taking these little plastic dolls because they think they are suffering, and they take them to the medical urgencies for them to look at the rubber babies. So people can love anything and feel love coming from anything. It is a matter of availability, disponibility, vulnerability, accessibility. It's all a matter of what each one is going through at certain points of their life. There was times where we can meet someone that would say nothing to us, but then there was times that the same person, if they arrive at the right moment, you can have a story for the rest of your life. So I think love is not overrated on itself, but is something that should be more seen as a mutual experience instead of an individual one that most people tend to experience, right? Because relations tend to be bland, people fall into routines, and all of a sudden, what were two people that decided to have a relationship, be it of friendship or of marriage, they end up basically two strangers because their lives are not 24 hours with one another, and they have separate routes that meet at the end of the day, right? Or at some point, or a week, or a month. So I'm not so sure that if love is more than something that help us to have a good moment here, to, I wouldn't say to have fun, but to make it much more appreciative that we have this experience.
Well, I think in terms of like the Greek perception of love, like they had all these different forms, right? That branched off. You had familial love, you had romantic love, and all the rest of this stuff that they had individual words for and different categorizations for. And I think far too often the generalized term of love gets thrown around basically as a analog for insanity, right?
Plato used to see that, right? That was insanity.
Right. So
That's why he chose boys, so he doesn't fall into that category.
you've got that
the
as
the
well. So what's
the
that, Ethan?
Buddhist. I was going to say I love your explanation to Ricardo's question. In it was in all the Greek lessons you provided there, and I was going to say it's very Buddhist before you mentioned it being very Buddhist. Um, the Buddhists actually term love into four aspects. Of course, I'm obsessed with four, so I know them: love of self, love for others, love for the happiness of others, and love for all beings in equanimity. And each one requires the completion of the prior. You cannot have love for others unless you have love for yourself.
Self.
Uh, so it's more like a do rather than a feel. And because love for self, what is that? Is that just a feeling? No, you take care of yourself, and for me, be much more critical of myself than others. I should tone that down and love myself more. Um, there's a lot of other ways to apply that. Uh, the four aspects of love, the four immeasurables, as they are defined, because each one, even though there is a completion in order for there to be the next level imparted, there it's immeasurable. Love is immeasurable, and the I think that all beings are perceptible as points of light, equal in their emission of and their radiation. Um, the differentiation is the lineage. I was actually going to define it in terms of sacred geometry, and Headless brings out the book that he was already.
He's ahead of you today. He's ahead of you.
And so one can imagine us as all beings to that immeasurable point. And we're created in equal fashion, but we have a different level of connection, maybe perceptible as a linear connection with others, with the earth, with higher beings, with God, X, Y, Z. So I think the Buddhists also term this idea in relation to a set of four via precious human body. This set of four is called the four thoughts, and it is so important to Buddhism that they just call it the four thoughts, which I think points to its notability. So precious human body is the first of the four thoughts, and impermanence is the second, karma and samsara are the third and fourth. People might be familiar with karma. Samsara is essentially the mess we are in. These two sets of four are very helpful in considering these existential questions that are really eternal. If before we could even probably vocalize or verbalize these questions, we were contemplating things in these this set of like, how do we ask this and what do we do? And there's another Buddha was noted to travel and present lessons, and people would always ask him stuff, and he would answer and provide these great metaphysical lessons and ideas. However, there are 14 unanswered questions of Buddha, and they all are essentially what you ask, in the sense that even Buddha couldn't answer, or it's speculated that the answer has no benefit, so he did not provide the answer. I'll break down a few of them because they're so poignant. Is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? So they couldn't get an answer to it one way, so they asked it the other way, right? Is the world infinite? Is the world not infinite?
Duality, then.
Well, all of most of them are asked in a dualistic manner. But I think it's that they were trying to get the answer in any way that they could. There, a couple are not asked in that manner, but and are essentially put in a shortened version of this polarity. Is the cosmos? We kind of went over that, but the 14 unanswered questions of Buddha are just profound. Is the world infinite? Is time infinite? Is the self identical with the body, or is it different from the body? Does Buddha exist after death, or not, or both, or neither? So yeah, it's notable in the duality, but it's also, I think, a useful in its just presentation of, well, some of these things we may never know, and even if we knew, we might not have to find the answer useful for our development or our existence, or both, right? But it is interesting that they're put in that format of, is it not, is it neither, or is it both? But very, very interesting that he didn't want to answer them.
Well, I think the thing I always find interesting about Buddha is the time period that he was writing in and how similar it was to the Greek sort of provenance with the height of the philosophical movement back then. And so you've got these two, it's just like a band of philosophy opened up across the world, and then all of a sudden, just as soon as it was open, it was gone. And you've got
It's
Buddha rising
interesting.
out of that.
And I like look at the set of four as like an example of this kind of emergence, in the sense of how important the four humors were to Greek understanding of the world and people, and to that, these different sets of four out east. And I mean, the Greeks wanted silk robes, right? And I mean, there was definitely a whole exchange that I think is
Galen's work was the preeminent medical textbook until the 1700s. Galen was, classically trained in Rome, and that's what the medicine was for that long. So, I mean, you want to talk about influential in the West. That guy shaped so many different minds, but it's really strange that he doesn't get as much attention. But,
it's too simple that the complexity people get distracted by other things, right? Not that it's not applicable, but they just go, oh, okay, no, we're moving on.
Well, I was going to make the point about sacred geometry and love. First, you have a point that is the center of nothing, because there is no outside, right? And so it has no meaning without the two, right? And then the two gives meaning to the one, meaning that they sort of share in this relationship that is kind of the very first form of love, is the 2 points, right? Duality, while at the same time similarity. And
Isn't
then you've
that
got
the
the
image?
third.
Isn't that the image that Ethan shared last trialogue?
Exactly. So going from that sacred geometric perspective, you can really understand how, well, yeah, I guess love is scalable infinitely, and it has near infinite meaning. But I think the very basis of that meaning comes down to the sacred geometry, which is why it's so fucking important. Because it shapes all the rest of the philosophical principles that rise out of it, and all the mathematics and everything else. And I think that's a Pythagorean / Eastern form of thought that was being expressed, something that was maybe even more primeval than what we think of as science today.
Well, regarding all that was said, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Shaman that is on the audience. He just sent a good message. Thank you, Shaman, for being there. In terms of using what we know in science and what Ethan and you said of we all being equals, they are using the light from this bright explosion of light on when the sperm enters the egg and is viable, they are using this system to determine how viable the egg is, no longer if it is viable or not, which means that they are detecting that some have much brighter light than others when conception is created. Now, we don't have studies to see if the right conditions appear or not necessarily, if these people that have the brighter life would be more powerful in some regard, be it spiritual or whatever. But for some reason, there are people that have much brighter emission of light than others. And they are using that now to see if the child will have problems in development or so. It has some correspondence to what comes after that happens. And in the other terms, well, you talk about the love, and I think that the highest form of love is extremely selfish because it is your love for the love to others. It is the appreciation of the emotion that you get by helping others, by see others' happiness, by seeing that everyone is good, that the problems are solved. So that's not to me. I always saw it for many years. I never saw it as something that is selfish. Sorry, there is from selfishness. It comes from egotism. Is that a word in English?
Right.
Yes. Right. Thank you. So it is a deepest form of egotism. And on one side, you see those that use it as a projection to do the good. On the other side, you see those that use it to do the things that we don't agree with, but it all comes from their love for what they are doing. So both evil and good come out of love. Right?
The
It's the
Buddhists
same.
the Buddhists say the exact same thing in the sense that helping others is totally selfish because we get good karma for it.
Sure. I taught him. So
I have a image here that's kind of neat. Can I share it without messing anything
sure,
up?
No,
Or
I gotcha.
you share it?
sure.
Yeah.
There you go.
This is a elaboration of the Pythagorean Tetractys. You brought up the Pythagoreans. I thought it'd be interesting to share. I don't know how foundational or accurate this is, or if someone's just being very creative. But the Tetractys is certainly based on this four layered of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 points. 1 point symbol for the point, 2 points symbol for the line, 3 points the minimum number needed for a plane, and 4 points the minimum number needed for a solid or volume. And I think it's a neat breakdown of the concepts further in that there's the void, that there's the masculine and feminine, sun and moon. There's the three main sulfur, mercury, and salt, and then there's the four elements, which I thought is dope. What is that, Atlas?
Oh, sorry. I got to take this down for a second. You'll see it.
I just thought that was a neat elaboration of the Tetractys.
They got the Tetractys in here, as well as several other points about exactly what you were talking about. But the whole idea in the plane, making this sort of meditation out of geometry, is that it puts you in touch with the most primal values. So this was the idea of having the mental exercises of the platonic solids and all the rest of these things, is to create that kind of 3D space inside of a person's head that you can create from, and have that imagination that can actually, build structures inside of your imagination. So I think a lot is missing from our current education system, because we're not focused on having a three-dimensional understanding of a three-dimensional world.
I would say that the cause for that, the root, is that we are not taught to be individuals. We are taught to be collectives. And is that loss of individuality that caused the loss of loving of the self? because no one knows themselves. No one
In
does.
the United States, we're more taught to be individuals than collective, compared to Europe, I think. But we're not taught to be individuated individuals.
Okay.
I think it's simpler than that. I think it's the lack of music, right? Music gets you thinking geometrically
Hmm.
in terms of both the rhythm, the all the different inputs that you have to be taking in as you're producing music, and if you're doing it accompanying, vibrational energy that carries meaning, you're creating structures, and so this is kind of like the birth of the thought form is around the campfire. It's telling stories. It's creating. And I think in a lot of ways, if we're not thinking about those two acts being, kind of not exclusive, we're not really understanding why we're here and what we're creating around us. You
Sure.
have to have that geometric way of seeing the world.
Well, if you consider that more and more people are being drawn to specific groups that are now larger than fewer and larger than they ever were, uh, and all is focused on representation and not on being. So when they keep showing, when you talk about the love for the self as the beginning of a human enclosure into a dynamic, alive world where we have to commune with others, it's all in shadows because you dress what you want and you enter in the circle where you want to be exactly as you are expect to be represented, but empty because you don't know yourself. You never explored exactly who you are, just what you like or what you like others being. That's even worse.
Right.
So that's what happens more is so if that self is not recognized, how can we expect that anything that comes after that is viable? So we end up in this chaos where everyone is an individual without being so, because it's your clothes, your music, your this, your that, but in the end is yours to be we and not you. So it's to fit in a box. Let's put you in a box that you like. I like that box, and to me is that lost of exploration of individuality that comes from childhood, where you destroy every single talent that the child might have by normalizing it into the conformity of the curriculum that eventually kills whatever is creativity, capability of expression, or spirituality. It's just eradicated on the first years of life.
I
And there
think
is no, go on.
I think what really revealed a lot of that was COVID. You know, it's like that was the test, and you got to see firsthand all these people who talk about individualism and all the rest of this, high ideals, how they really feel about those concepts. They don't really have them in very high regard, and these were the people closest to us, and they were trying to exert their influence in such a way that it's coercive.
So, and what to say of the couples that when they face themselves locked into a house 24 hours a day, they find out I don't like you that much anymore, right?
Right.
Because one thing is to see one another for 2 or 3 hours a day and then go to bed, and another thing it has to actually live with that person, and all his traits and all his frustrations and all its projection of problems into others, because that's what we do. We project our problems into others so we don't have to face them ourselves, and that's all a result of that loss of individuality. People just don't analyze their actions, so there is no involvement. There is just a code of education of conduct that is followed without any perception of I've been wrong there, or that felt good. I helped someone, or there is. It's just something that it's like a movie. People go to a movie when they came out. So what's the movie about? I don't know, but I liked it. So it's that kind of stuff to me.
Right.
And music, a musician told me once that music is not the notes that you play. but how you set the silences. And today, we are not worried with the silences as the old musicians were. We are worried about the beat. And so that beat that monopolized the whole music industry almost today is the antithesis of music. It's right the opposite because it has no harmony, it has no value in itself beyond the fact that people dress cool, walk half naked, and move in a very sexual ways. And this is being done right now from 8 years old to bands that attract people that are older. So even music is being reduced to three or four notes sequenced by electronic beats that most people argue has no soul because it's just a computer producing the notes. So all of that is being removed. All the aspects that are the manifestations of our spirituality and our self is being
Let,
eradicated.
let me ask you this, Ricardo. Have you ever heard a pop song that wasn't representing love as insanity? Every one of them. It's just like, what are you doing? This is stupid. Why are you doing that? It's kind of, I mean, that's what we've been pumped full of all of our lives is love is insanity coming from every pop song. It's like, what is
It,
this?
it reminds me of the confusion between passion and compassion, right? Like
Right?
don't get that twisted that someone being engaged and active and forward as passionate, maybe it's actually compassion, right? Because passion has that leaning of you'll do anything to win. And you mentioned earlier, Ricardo, about people so passionate, if you will, on doing the right thing that they end up doing wrong. That's the same idea in being insistent on winning rather than being steadfast in not losing. Sounds really similar. Could be similar, but the difference in the pursuit of not losing is totally restrained and maybe even principled instead of not instead of the insistence on winning. That can be really dangerous, right?
Well,
So
that's why everything that they've been doing for the last years is to take the special thing of this or that character and transform it to a normality. So, what they did to Star Wars, now everyone is a Jedi, right? It's more democratic. Why would they, though those white supremacists or whatever they are, Jedi supremacists would have all the midi-chlorians? Everyone has those midi-chlorians. Well, that's not the story, right? That's not the story, and that is reflected. Look, have you seen this new thing? I think I talked about it. I was profoundly revolted. This new movie of Odysseus with Ralph Fiennes. I think it's a complete destruction of what the man wrote all these centuries ago. Because instead of having a man that is sure of himself, he's half God, he's very powerful, he's a king amongst men. You see it in he was in rags to the island, and I remember the story. He was in rags to the island, not because he was a beggar, weak, fragile, traumatized man, but because he wanted to see what others were seeing. That's why he disguised himself as a beggar, so he can expose everyone and destroy them, basically, right? With the help of his son, but he destroyed them completely. So in the movie, we see this fragile God who has no power whatsoever, who is completely vulnerable and traumatized by the acts of war. So we're talking about a guy that lived war all his life, and war was it to do what he loved. That's why he abandoned everything he had to go and fight that because he wanted all others wanted glory, right? So he has this tragic return home that takes him much longer than he was expecting because he had to pass through those experiences. And then all of that is removed from the equation, and all we have is a man that was lost from land to land, embarrassed to return home because of the sins that he has committed. So this then people in 2 generations, are they going to remember the real story, the one that was given? They won't.
I I don't know. I think a lot more people are just avoiding the hell out of Hollywood. You know, movies like that, they don't have a very long shelf life. I mean, I know we probably transpose the movies we grew up with, but there's a huge qualitative difference between the stuff that we grew up with and the crap that they pump out now.
The Z films that we had now are good films compared to what they are doing. So and that's not saying little, right?
Right. I just I wonder what they're thinking is going to come next. Is it just AI slop? Are we going to just shut down all the movie theaters and say, what? Instead of all this effort into putting out quality entertainment, we're going to flood you with AI slop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from every channel you could possibly take it in.
But there's two sides to that. How many good scripts are there that no studio will pick up? And if you have a good infrastructure of AI, you don't have to do with the caprice of the actors, the immense value that they ask to participate. You don't have to do anything of that. You just have to pay, I don't know, a tenth of the value. It is produced in AI. Well, the AI is still not there. It's still not there because it can create perfect 15 to 20-second clips, then maybe that's stretching a bit. But when you try to insert next scene, it doesn't work. He alters the scene. He cannot do it exactly the same, but it's there. Six
Well,
months,
I
six
think
months a year, we'll get there.
the studios already have shit that will blow away any of the stuff that you can buy subscriptions to online because that's just how they do things.
Yeah, but they are not using it. They are using it 5-10% right now on movies. We don't even see that they are using just AI. There's no CGI. There's nothing. It's just prompts. They have these prompt engineers, and it's just a prompt, and it's done. And look, I see the democratization in that. I see that a lot of bad stuff is going to come out, but there's still good stuff that wouldn't come out any other way.
Right.
So there's always that duality, right? And I think that the first person that go now and invests 2 or 3 millions in a space and putting computers and putting people to work on this, when this blows up, when the AI is there in 1 year or 2 years, it will be on the front line to start changing the movie industry completely. So
Yeah.
what will happen to these multimillionaire actors that some of them I even like as persons? Well, they'll have to figure it out, go back to theater. That will be the new thing because theater is real. There's no AI in theater, right? You have to be there and do it. So go back to that.
Yeah, I think so. Back in the day, uh, if you were an actor or an actress, that was just another way of saying you're a prostitute, right? So after these events, the prostitutes would go out there and whore themselves on the stage to get a little extra money because, they were doing these public events. Well, that was a tradition that carried on well into Roman days and even past the collapse of Rome into Syria. And so, you had all these prostitutes that were basically part of the theater, which is, just a way of showing off the merchandise. So this is one of the reasons why England refused to have females playing anything is because they wanted to avoid the prostitution. And so they just had males playing all the characters like in Shakespeare's time. But actors have traditionally just been whores. Like just the entire history of acting is just being a whore. So now these whores in Hollywood that have just been, going along with the program and never opening their mouths except for, to take one in there. They're going to understand what it's like to be normal again. And I can't wait because fuck them.
So Hooters is going back again, right? Because it's dying, as I heard that Hooters is dying. So
Right. Now we're going to fill up the Hooters again with all of the out of work actresses. coming back to Middle America.
Look, there is some good people there out there. I think, for instance, Danny Day-Lewis, that I think it's the best actor that you can find, is a guy that doesn't make a movie just because you throw him a trillion. He doesn't care, right? He only takes a project if he actually likes it. And then if he say, you want to start now, you won't. I have to do a year just being the character before I do the movie. So if you want me, you have to accept my conditions. It's not yours, right? So there is still a few that I think Daniel Day Lewis, if he was in the system, he came out fairly quickly out of there. But he has the luck also to be in Europe, and so that's different. But most of them follow the route that doesn't allow them to have many choices. So they have to do it. It's all part of contracts, and there's a sacrifice which many of them have taken. Go and watch how many actors, how many musicians lost a child, for instance, or a wife. That's not a coincidence. That was not an accident. It is a sacrifice. It's much easier to say, oh, my son dressed as Superman and decided to jump from the window,
Right.
right? Who was the child that was down there? Was it his or was another? Where is his child? What happened to her? Right? People, this is all taken by the drama of the situation, and people don't focus on what is really happening there. Because most of them have done this sacrifice. Either the partner or one of the children was offered. It is a common practice. And the things that we criticize is the things that were least important. For instance, in the 90s, you get to a stage and you have a table full of Coke. Right there. It doesn't matter. You just go there and serve yourself.
Right.
And now it's terrible. You cannot. Now we're having what they call them, the intimacy. They're called intimacy counselors, right? They have to have that because they need to know. Just a second.
Well, I think yeah, it's it's the addition of all of these different stressors. I think there's a ancestral element to this because a lot of the stars we see in Hollywood come from these families that were bred into this. And how much abuse can these people really take? I mean, if you go back before that, all of these people were fresh and new to Hollywood, and then all of their kids turned out to be, amazing drunks and whatnot. Now, the children's children of these people are running the thing, and it's running out of a juice at every turn. I think Hollywood's on its way out. It's gonna collapse pretty hard.
Well, I have made this question many times. That is, they've been losing money for almost 10 years now, and it's not little money. It's
Right.
a lot of money. For instance, the Rings of Power series cost more per episode than to make the 3 movies that Peter Jackson did per episode. To do that crap, that absolutely aberration of a creation, right? Done by people that have diarrhea instead of brains, right? Because spiritual, they don't have anything. So if you like the Rings of Power, get out now. You can go away from this trialogue. You don't belong here because it's an absurd what they did. A complete absurd. With the amount of money that they had, they could have given us a dream of the millions of fans that this tale has, and they could have made imaginable amounts of money out of it. Even if it was by greed, they could have done it, but they choose to do social engineering instead. And they
Well,
pick up this brain damaged people that are rejected by everyone, and they think they are the masters. You go and see the people that wrote the Rings of Power. Go and listen to them talk. They are traumatized, deficient humans who have been rejected all their lives, and they hate everything and everyone, and mainly they hate themselves and project that outside. And they have been out of this new school that uses the rainbow for everything, and they are all daltonic because they don't even know what the color the rainbow is. They decide to change it because it's Their idea is always better. Uh, so the result is here. It's they don't. My point is this: to them, I don't know that money is important because they've been spending it like it has no end, like
Have
it
you
is
ever
not
seen
physical.
Have you ever seen the movie The Producers by Mel Brooks?
Brilliant.
Right. So in that movie, he's depicting what if you could make more money on flops by buying insurance on the flops beforehand and then cashing in the insurance on the supposed. It's the idea behind short selling a stock, right? So you're just hopefully you're going to get more money back because you're not putting it all into the production. So he puts on this Springtime for Hitler after post World War II. And so he's expecting everybody to hate it. It's a musical with Hitler and Abel Braun. And he expects it to flop, but people love it. And so he ends up taking a bath because the insurance policy was against the losses, and he ended up making more, so he had to pay out to the insurance company. And that's that's one of these ideas of maybe using Hollywood for money laundering. And we know that it has been the source of lots and lots of money laundering going back to the 1930s. I mean, this is where all of these Jewish mobsters who were part of Murder Incorporated started these studios.
This is
So,
applicable in the real estate industry too. If you own real estate, and many different places, different real estate, you have different income coming in. It actually becomes more profitable for you to keep the rent or super high and not rent it because the economy's bad. No one's renting my building. I don't know what's going on, and use that loss as a tax reduction towards your taxes. So it becomes more profitable for a lot of real estate owners to keep the prices high and keep people out of it, not even living in it.
yep.
So there's so much incentivization for perceived loss that actually benefits the oligarchs, if you will.
True. Building 7.
Have you ever driven through Northern Virginia up around Washington D.C.?
Not this week. No.
Well, all of the buildings there are empty. They're all empty, and they all have these big name contractors on the side of the buildings. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, all the rest of these. All these big buildings all around the outside of Washington D.C. are sitting there empty because that's how they keep home prices through the roof.
Yeah.
Spain had a few years ago. I don't know if it's still as such. A complete city, a huge city, right? A huge city with airport, so you can tell the size. It had airport, a major hospital, fire department, all of it. You know how many people live there?
10.
None. None. Everything is abandoned. It was some 7 years ago. Completely abandoned. There is no one there. You can go through the airport wherever you want to go. There is no one there. It's a ghost town. So they use the city to make footage and go racing with cars or play around inside the airport because there is no one there. There's no one, not even a security. There is no one. Completely ghost town that even Spanish don't know exists, right? And and as I've been learning, there are several places in the world that at that time it happened the same thing. Maybe what you said is the answer to that. How they build one house costs something, right? And you can afford as a builder, okay, I didn't sell that. But a whole city, who's going to pay for that? Because there's no profit. It's just there. You spend the money on the workers, you spend the money on the material, you spend the money on the machines, and it's sitting there for no one to use. And I find it, well, very interesting. But you might you might have said the explanation for that.
Well, there's a lot to do with the business cycle going on where you've got all of this supposed wealth that you're going to be extracting in a given area. And so they're making all these loans expecting to make so much more back after the productivity fills in the rest of it. Well, unfortunately, that's all just speculative, right? Because maybe one of those loans goes down in value, and now all the rest of the loans that are tranched with it get axed as well, and then one little chink in the armor of the massive, paper edifice can cause whole cities to go abandoned. Or even worse, they make it look like it's being productive on paper, like over in China, where they just build entire cities that are never intended for anybody to live in. And now they're tearing them down just to keep people busy. Because you've got to somehow slow the velocity of currency during hard times as well as, times of plenty. But right now, it's like they just make up shit to do, and then they base these fake numbers and send them around the world and say, look, these fake numbers make us look great. But everybody knows how they're manipulated. Everybody sees how they're doing it in their own countries. And some, I guess, morons, I guess all the people who are writing these loans are a bunch of idiots, can't figure out that all of these numbers are fake. And
Look,
they keep underwriting everything.
how I give a simple example. How is it possible that a football team makes money? How is it possible?
Tickets.
No,
It's
no,
got to be
no.
tickets.
It isn't tickets. You do the math. You calculate the tickets.
Advertising. It's advertising.
You calculate how much you have to pay, the millions and millions you have to pay just for the players. But then you
Most
have
of
the
it.
maintenance. You have the electricity of those lights. You have the lawn to
Subsidies.
take care. Sorry?
Subsidies.
Mm,
In
not
the
not
local.
here.
Well, I'm no, I'm just speculating. I don't know the
Not
answer with
here.
certain for
Not
every
here.
stadium, but in the
It's it,
states, they are totally locally subsidized to begin with, the construction and so forth, and
It's
then
so
most of the
bad.
money comes from advertising. And yeah, they never end up doing really anything for the community if they end up being economically viable. But I think in the states anyway, it's mostly ads. And the bigger games they get into, the more advertising dollars there is. So there's
yeah,
their
yeah.
big incentive.
I acknowledge that in the States that's possible to do, but in Europe that isn't. Because first of all, you are paying 11 people the same money that you pay to every single star in NBA, for instance, right? It's too much money. The money that goes out is 10 times the money that comes in. And they justify this saying, oh, for instance, they bought Ronaldo, that to me is an example of everything that is wrong with the world. Uh, you get that guy. The pass that he had to pay, let's suppose it was 140 or 300,000, 300 million, right? So that's 300 million on one go. Then you have to pay the guy more than that a year, right? But he's not the only one on the team. There's lots of guys on the team, and they all make more than $1 billion a year, much more than that, right? And the football club has to pay all of that, has to pay for all the personnel, has to pay for all the infrastructure, has to pay for all the buildings they have for the maintenance. They have to they have to advertise their own games, right? And by selling the tickets, you could fill the stadium 10 times and the money would never be enough for what they spend. So where is the mystery, and why is it such a taboo that we cannot talk about finances of football clubs? Because we start making the math and it doesn't work. So what do they do to get money? What do you know that they have
Riding
that other
circus.
people don't? No, there is the fact
Riding
that they are not checked at airports. They can pass whatever they want. No one checks their bags or the materials. You only see the players with those small bags. That's what they show. And how about all the things that go behind that no one touches? It's like diplomatic immunity. They can be trafficking guns, people, drugs, anything they want, because they have to find ways to finance themselves, because it's not coming from the game. Obviously, at least here, it's impossible. There's no way they're making us money enough to pay. And then we hear on the news that all these clubs are in terrible debt, and yet they never go bankrupt. How is it possible? Because if the poor guy, like the company of my father that went bankrupt, I didn't see anyone saying, "Oh, don't worry, just keep working. I will give you some money to keep to you to keep moving." That doesn't happen. Why? Because it would be a little amount of money. But then we see the state say, "Oh, they have this problem," like the banks. The banks are going bankrupt, which is I find extraordinarily amusing because it means that the guy that is running the bank is the most idiot person on earth. Because if you are losing money when you can loan 10 times what you have physically, right? And each loan that you make counts in total for that 10 times next time you go and lend money to someone. So I only have $100, right? You ask me $10,000, and I can lend you that because it's numbers and the money doesn't exist. So the next guy that comes to me asking for money, I can now lend him $100,000 because I'm going to receive $10,000 from you. You can see how this math goes, right? It's impossible for a bank to go bankrupt. Impossible. There's no way. So the only way is someone grabbing the money and disappearing with it. And still, it's just numbers in the computer, so they could just pretend. And what we see is the prime minister saying, "Oh, this bank is very poorly. We have to keep the workers. Let's inject 100 million into that bank." They were giving money to banks, right?
Right. Well, the important step in getting everybody on an even more phony baloney currency is to make sure everybody has their real ID and all of that data is going to a place like Peter Thiel's best friend's firm. What's it called? Palantir, right? So
Volunteer.
the only way that we can get to a much more fake level of money is to finally make that jump and get that global surveillance grid under Palantir underway. And as we all know, Donald Trump this week just officially announced that he wants Palantir to run all of the data for the United States government. So congratulations, everybody. That's
Wait,
what
but
Dove was up to.
I was told that the rich people have our best interests in mind.
Oh, you heard
You
that.
did?
Mm.
Sorry. Bad, silly.
But do you think that could be a lie?
No. I was told they have so many things to do that they're only being gracious with their time.
Oh. And when Headless was generous enough to share this story of the Palantir with me, I was commenting with him that the Palantir is all-seeing stone. That's the meaning of a Palantir. And the purpose of a Palantir is for the king to see what's going on his realm and what their subjects are doing. That's the function of a Palantir, right?
They know.
And so they use this name out of all things from a guy in England that wrote a book to determine a strategy.
That's
does
actually
exactly that.
a decent segue into an idea of mine. If unless Headless, you want to.
I had something to contribute. So what you're talking about is the implementation of this, what they call a panopticon. It's an electronic panopticon. And what a panopticon is it comes from U.S. prison terminology, where you've got one central pillar in the middle that is the observation post for all of the cells on the outside. And from that place, they have big old mirrors all over the outside of their window. So nobody in the cells knows when they're looking at them or when they're not there. So everybody just assumes that they're being spied upon. And so having this panopticon made electronic and put into everybody's pockets and now associated with the way you spend money and everything else now means that you just assume that you're being spied on everywhere you go and everything you do.
Oh yeah.
And so that's the effect that they were going for.
How
and
big?
I would also presume that you are everyone, us. We are on certain lists, and it is the number of lists that you are on that engage the attention of such things. So, I mean, I don't know why that is meaningful. I'm just saying that they're
Yeah.
all assimilating all kinds of information. The list might be that you walk by a certain fire hydrant. Like,
This is
Look,
your social credit score.
exactly.
any number of things. I mean,
That's the next step. What do you do after you implement this Palantir system? You are now ready to start the social credits because you have everyone on the same place, right? So the next step is social credits. I have very little doubt. It can take a year, it can take 10, but that's the next step.
and
They're
that's
going to
going to
wait.
require collective acceptance, right? Like you said about the collective and the individual. Like sometimes I'm just like, oh man, I don't care. Like they may not be the best motivations, but sometimes just individuals disagreeing, which there are many in the United States. Like sometimes that's at least a good start because you might formulate a better
Okay,
opinion.
so
But you're in control
so
so much that that doesn't
so I
happen
have a
necessarily.
question for you. I have a question
Please.
for you, Ethan. There was always people divergent in their opinions of the government or how things are done, right? So, in general terms, how would you divide the Americans before and during 9/11?
Um, how would I? Well, it was pretty polarized. There, the Clinton years were very polarized, and a lot of people you know, were super supportive of what he did for the economy, and um, I don't know necessarily a whole lot else that he was known for, but people, there was the fall of the Soviet Union that he, kind of was, keeping
Yeah, but
Yeltsin in power.
what I mean is, people
Well,
in
I
the
was just going to say that there was still a very much distinct left and right dynamic going on. A lot of
sure,
people
but
were.
everyone agreed that something had to be done. There was only this little group that was seeing between the lines and saying that that could not have happened as they described. Right? It's like
I mean,
COVID. You have most people adhering to it because it's an emergency that can affect you and everyone.
sure,
And so
sure,
people
and that's
tend to unite in situations of crisis. So
honestly, this is
all they need to make people accept the social credits, is create enough chaos when the system has to say, look, we have no other way to help you and to try to make your life better unless you enter this system, because that's the only way the government will have an oversee and see what everyone needs and what are the differences between each individual and all of
no
that.
doubt.
And people in the situation of crisis, you have China, you have Russia, you have the international crisis, you have this pandemics that they are constantly saying they are
Well,
already.
let's break it down because they often will put this big threat into the convincing of the collective to accept things by that threat, or put in terms of A or B, either or. That's what you have here. You
Sure,
have a
problem
either or.
reaction solution.
And that last week I mentioned the master slave dialectic that is Hegelian, and this triad is also Hegelian, known as the Hegelian dialectic. More specifically, it started out. This is exactly what I wanted to talk about today. So, as
Oh, and we
thesis,
are out of time.
thesis antithesis, and synthesis, right? This is the triad that Hegel is known to have proposed, this dynamic, and now we see it in correspondence with how people mostly know it as and recognize it for as problem, reaction, solution, all controlled by the same network, the initial problem. And so whether the problem is set up by the factions that might present this either or choice setup, or whether they're just on it, right? Like COVID in particular. Certain things were set up in an either or fashion. War, I mean, for everyone in Ukraine and Russia right now, it's either or. More than likely, that there's so much guns going on and all this and that. The system tries to set up either or fashions to make a resolution that is suitable to them, right? The problem, reaction, solution. But there's Hegel himself, in fact, noted that it was a limited schema, and it's limited because it puts people into a box that kind of propels us into that state of problem, reaction, solution, if you will, or the chosen synthesis. And so I'm always looking at triads, and whenever there's a triad, I'm looking for the fourth aspect, and I call it nullisis. And so whenever anyone presents an either or, that is totally limited and should be rejected. There is never just an either or. I mean, unless it's a fight or not, right? But even fight or flight, that is actually a limited schema too, because you might say there's a notion of befriending, and or just giving up too. Those are both choices to threats. I'm not saying either one is more
Ethan,
violent. Yeah.
have you heard of the nothing ever happens chud?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, that's like your null synthesis, right? Nothing ever happens chud.
Well, or if I think of it more as refusing to accept their polarity or triad that are limiting all these other notions. That it might be pointed out in like mathematical terms as A or B or AB, the synthesis, or X. So like often I mean, not total. It's not totally like this, but it's mostly perceived as you either got to have nuclear power or you got to have gas petrol power. Well, what about solar? What about wind? What about all these other things that are, of course, looked at, but it's not like limited. There's things that we're not even thinking of, and things that have been prevented, right?
Well,
Like,
right, but we're talking about the march of history, and what communism that grew out of Hegelianism wanted to do is prevent the march of history, they called it. And so they wanted to
and that's
stop.
why the West called it the end of history when they fell.
Right. So what they're doing, I think, with this nothing ever happens thing, we go from one crisis to the next without any resolution. And then
Sure.
what do we have happen after that? Nothing. Nothing ever happens. And so that's sort of where that idea comes from. But what if that means that they're in complete control right now and they're giving us null synthesis? They're like, here you go, nothing ever happens.
Nothing
We're
ever
not going to actually
happens.
have anything
I
happen
always thought it
because
was. I thought that it was kind of had a element of sarcasm in it, right?
it
Because
does.
things are like always happening, and we can really, as the systems and the institutionalized people do, take advantage of it, right? So we think nothing is happening. They're like, oh well, I'm investing in war now. I'm doing this now. Ricardo was talking about this massive electrical development up over the huge amount of mountains that's like the ultimate oligarchical collectivism unit. And it would have been better off as way more localized, but just all these things set up for some institutionalized person to make money off of the people that we got to do A or B, so I guess we'll do it this way, instead of being open to considering these other things. So
Well,
I just now
I think
the polarity or triad, just say no. What about X? Sorry.
Well, I think in terms of geopolitics, it's like we're always given this high tension scenario. So like U.S. facing off against Russia, and then they've been saying for years now we're edging closer and closer to nuclear war, but no nukes ever go off. And then they say, well, we've got a political situation in the United States that's going to boil over into some kind of a civil war. Nothing ever happens there. And then they also say the same thing, we're going to have a stock market collapse any day now. And we keep vacillating between these massive highs and total lows. But then, nothing
Pure
ever
speculation.
happens.
Just speculation.
Right. So, I think that's what it's in reference to is like, it seems like none of these things, like the dam is cracked. It's ready to go on a lot of different fronts, but nothing ever happens. So it's that sort of recognition.
I would say that nothing ever happens to those that are looking at the problem and not living it, right? because in some places the problems are happening, but we feel no responsibility, right?
Right.
In fact, we are encouraged to only take responsibility as a citizen when they want us to vote. That's the
It
only time
also
when we become important all of a sudden and responsible, a responsible citizen, because on anything else, we have no responsibility. And the problem is 99% of the people don't want that responsibility. They want the solutions to be presented, and they just want to choose one of those that is government approved, that allows them to proceed with their lives. Right? That's
it reminds me too of how adaptive people are, in the sense that like they could be in this kind of stasis of nothing ever happens, but in a war going on that we would be totally shocked by, for we'd have to get arranged into by months of shock, right? But they're in a state where nothing ever happens,
yeah,
just the war.
that's why this there
It's
is
not
this
adaptive.
yeah that's why I see these good people motivated to go to the army, to go and fight for their country in a foreign country, right? They think they are doing the right thing, and that they are trained to be invincible, and that the other guys are just some peasants with fork picks. Uh, and then when they get there, they realize that the training doesn't take for nothing on the field, that it's an horror complete, and they come back traumatized and thinking, why the hell did I decide to do that?
Well, the
Right?
war taking place right now in Ukraine is probably unlike anything we've ever seen, because it has everything of all the past wars, plus these POV drones and the drones that are dropping, and long distance drones. I mean, which are just missiles, I guess, but astonishing. The I guess there was a strike like 4,000 kilometers from the border into Russia today. But yeah, you can't even imagine being hunted by
Yeah,
drones. You
but
never
look,
even see the enemy.
if a war turns out to be in the middle of the Atlantic between non-pilot things, right, and the country that loses is the one that runs out of money producing more drones and more bombs, well, that's a war compared to what we have now. It wouldn't be a bad war, right?
Well, they say Hitler lost World War II because he ran out of tanks. Not, it was more a resource war at the end of it.
Right.
Curious you've mentioned that, because I found out this week that there was a report that came out even in the news, but was then taken down at the time, that when the Allies entered the tunnel where he supposedly killed himself, not only he wasn't there, as the tunnel has a way out that led to a place where he could escape without any trouble of being seen by the Allies. But that is never mentioned. And then we have all these typical Nazi cities, or German cities, if you want to call them like that, in South America, where these communities were living, where these guys that served the SS and the Nazis were having
And
normal lives.
I traveled to Chile pretty 3 times, I think, and it was pretty well known by the locals who was former Nazi.
Have you guys ever heard of the Circle of Friends? I think it's called.
I'm
So
not sure.
down in Argentina, there was a guy in a boat who had his boat break down, and then all of these German-speaking blonde-haired kids get off of their boat and help him fix his. He's not exactly sure how they did it, but then for some reason, one of them wanted to hitch a ride with that guy, and they were sailing around, and then I think there was something about damage that happened, and then they paid him in like these, like I think it was like German war bonds or something. This is like in the 1980s when he's sort of running into these Germanic types down in South America, and it was just odd because they weren't speaking Spanish and everything else. And it's like, that's still going on because, it was all allowed to happen. It's all a stage, I mean, you talk about these Nazi hunters that were supposedly going around and killing these Nazis during the 70s and 80s. Well, why didn't they go to Argentina at all? You'd think that would be the first stop. But apparently they skipped that one. So all of this was pretty well known, but I think the whole thing is kind of a stage, I don't believe any of it.
No, look, if the war was financed by exactly the same people on both sides, they were giving money to both sides. So who was controlling the war and who was benefiting from the war? Let's just follow the money. And even that, I think that the idea of following the money is in itself a deceit, because these people are not constrained by money. It's by ideology. It's by agenda. It's not the money itself. This is not a matter of greed. This is a social agenda that is disguised as a greed.
Let me throw out something that's completely insane. So they say if time travel exists, then time travelers have already been here before, right? What if everything that's playing out now has to play out for a certain event in the future to happen? And these people keep coming back here and making sure that we stay in our timeline so that these people can exist in the future.
So I can tell you that the only way we know many years from now, and it's public, how to travel into the future the only way to travel in time that we know is to travel into the future. We just publicly don't know how to travel into the past. Travel into the future is the easiest thing you can do, because you grab a ship, you put it in the vacuum, and you accelerate for a year. Then when the year returns, you stop the machine and come back. So you slow down for a year, and then you come back another year, full speed accelerating until you have to stop this acceleration to get to the Earth. When you get to the Earth, you could have passed a day, a week, a year, a decade. It all depends how far you want to go and how much you can accelerate, right? And when you come back, the same systems work. It's the same system. So you grab a phone and you say, look, the line of the phone doesn't care for the rest. As long as you have a means of interacting, you can go back and say, look, this is what I've seen by a call or by a message. This is what I've seen. This is what's going to happen. This is the lottery number or whatever you want to do, right? And they are constantly informed of what goes ahead. So if you send a probe like this, and you have these strange lights that some are balloons and some are drones, but some might be something else that are appearing and watching. This could be machines sent at these high speeds and then return at these high speeds, and they are transmitting things from the present into the past because we are now living in the future. Like, this is very confusing, but
I heard
No, I get what you're saying. You're saying that the quantum entanglement from the place that they started from and the place that they're going is going to allow them to communicate over those distances?
exactly. The same way that the first interstellar machine that we created is still transmitting, and it's in a completely time that we are, because it's been accelerating for 30 years. It's not on our time, and no one thinks about this. Anything that goes into space and accelerates, it's not on our time anymore. It's a different time scale.
So if we're going to be really well, no, I want to go back to Ethan. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was going to say that I heard a physicist theorize that when we are able to time travel into the future, we will then be able to time travel into that point into the past. And so when time travel is created towards of the future, all of a sudden all these other beings may start traveling to the past, was his theory. So whether or not what we're seeing today is, I'm not saying either or that, but I'm just saying that his theory in relation to time travel I thought was interesting, that he explained in way more seriously and scientifically.
Ricardo, do you think you could bootstrap a kind of a transmitter to a device that would be like an AI? So let's say you put AI on a satellite and then you send it slingshotting around the solar system to be in the future and then start reporting back everything to the past. Has that already happened?
The easiest way to do that is, instead of coming back to the Earth, travel very far, very fast, return midway very fast, and just listen to radio transmissions, to television broadcasting, to radio, and you will learn exactly what is going on. You don't need to come to Earth.
Might not have that in the future. You would be better off having a satellite that can scan the outside of it so
Oh,
that
I'm,
you
I'm
could.
talking of small travels that only take you a year or 2 years into the future. I'm not talking about, because that implies speeds that I'm talking about what publicly is possible to do, right?
You could do this in the 1960s when they were launching the Voyager probe. You just have the probe go way out, turn around, come back, and they could have already been gathering data from 50 years in the future.
Exactly. They could. If they are capturing the antenna is always focused on Earth, so its antenna is always facing Earth. Always.
And we know they're traveling much faster than we are because they've exited the.
Look, the thing is this: you are speaking to your headquarters, right? You have a device that allows you to communicate with your headquarters, no matter how fast you are, or no matter how distant you are. Yeah, the only difference, it takes time to get to the point, but it's much quicker than time itself. So it always managed to overcome that. So my point is, you go and you come back, right? And you go back to the orbit of the moon, for instance. You are still communicating to the past because the machine didn't lose the communication.
Right.
You know that because of Voyager. Voyager didn't lose communication, and in fact, they expected for it to be shut down for decades now, and it's still working. Without the sun, they don't know how it is. So it's still working. The nuclear generator that was supposed to run out, it's still working. The same happened to those drones on Mars, those vehicles on Mars. No one knows who cleans their solar panels. Who cleans the solar panels of those machines? Because the dust came and they said, well, millions of dollars, but now it's useless because you cannot charge because it's full of dust. And the next day, the rover was walking and sending images, and they go and look, and it's clean. How the heck? Who cleaned the solar panels of the rovers, right?
Well, it could just be coming from Greenland. I saw the. Did you see the videos of the set that they have in Greenland? NASA has a big set that looks like Mars. They just color adjust it.
They did it for the moon too. If you go to Area 51, I still have the aerial. I don't have any aerial images of the Area 51. But if I had, I would have an image that shows the the place that where they designed the whole area they were going to land to, or supposedly, right? And so the footage that you take there with the bright light and so on is indistinguishable, of especially with the grain that they use from the real thing. And not to forget that they did use a stage to film everything, that I believe it's what we saw when they landed, because they were afraid to fail. And so, because they were afraid to fail and they are not going to tell the world that they failed after all of that investment, they prepared a video that they considered, for some reason, it was best to put that studio instead of the real footage. So we don't know where they went. I don't doubt that they went there. I just doubt that they went where they told us that they went, or that we see where they went, right? At least for the first mission. The other missions, although they contradict everything that they tell us about the moon, like the jump, the guy was going to jump because people were saying in magazines, this guy is going to the moon and he's going to do hula hoops in the air because he only weighs 30 pounds on the moon. So he's going to do crazy stuff. And with a suit on, he would weigh about, let me make the account, 140 pounds. So the same as a man if the moon doesn't have the gravity that they told us that they have. So what I mean is, when he jumped to show that he could jump 2 meters into the air, he jumped the exact same 30 to 40 centimeters that anyone with that weight would jump on Earth.
I got a quick physics question. If I was to blast off in a rocket ship traveling close to light speed, and time for me is moving slower than it is for you, would that also mean that you, looking at the craft, would think that it's moving slower than it actually is?
If you are moving at the speed of light, I cannot see you.
Close to.
I believe that beyond a very low percentage of the speed of light, you cease to be able to identify the reflective waves of light that give you the location of the object.
Well, it's a theoretical because apparently, since they would be moving faster in time than we are, well, they would be moving slower in time than we are because they're moving faster.
No, for them, the time passes exactly the same.
Right. But relative to us.
Relative to us, we are getting back in time. Look, if we look at this from a purely physics
it's
perspective.
It's tough to keep in your head, dude.
Yeah. If you look at this from a purely physics perspective, think of light and the way that light travels as time, right? And considering that everything that we see is a reflection of the object into our retinas, right? Everything you see is a reflection. That's why when there is no light, there is no reflection, you don't see, right? So because everything is a reflection of what you see, nothing of what you see is in the time that you think it is, right? Because if you are 10 paces from me, there will be a difference in the way I see you to the way that you are on that exact moment. It's very tiny, but there is a difference, right? So when you're looking to a spaceship that is traveling very fast, and you are looking from the stationary point on Earth, you keep seeing it until it disappears. But the time for you will go at the same rate, while in relation to you, our time is going much faster. So you and I will experience the same passage of time. The difference is you somehow are moving through the waves of time faster than time itself. And that's allow you to go into the future. That's why we don't know how to go into the past, because the light is already gone, right? You need to go ahead in order for it to work. You are muted, so
it brings up an interesting point close to mass. So if you're going close to the speed of light, your mass would become almost exponentially higher than what it is right now because of the force that you're applying to it.
Only if you move into the speed of light beyond the capabilities of the body. That's why all studies indicate that the acceleration should not exceed 2 Gs. If you constantly accelerate it, for instance, at 1 G, I think I'm going to say something stupid because I don't remember. I read this in Cosmos a long time ago. But if you accelerate at 1 G, after, let's extrapolate, a year or 2 years, you'll be at the speed of light because it's exponential, right? You don't need a big acceleration, so you won't feel a thing. But obviously, if I project your body into the speed of light, you will disintegrate. You become the light itself. You cease.
So what if there's some kind of field that you're interacting with that keeps the craft that you're in seemingly stationary?
It would have to phase out of time. And so,
right. I'm just speculating that I think there's other ways that
contact by Carl Sagan.
Right.
Contact.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just saying it seems to me that they've eliminated that problem by going in another direction. One thing I heard is how we're on the perfect planet because we can use detonation systems at the bottom of a rocket to propel us out of the atmosphere. On other planets that are bigger, the gravity would be stronger and it's therefore harder to get out of the atmosphere. But I think they would just come up with different solutions to the problem, right? In the sense that they would use a different mechanical comprehension in
Yeah,
total.
but if you want to create movement, you should use the same energy that stops you from having that movement, right? And that's not what we're doing. We are not using gravity against gravity. We are using the most archaic, primitive
So I'm
way
not
that you
arguing
can
that. Yeah.
to think possible. That it's just a balloon. It's the balloon full of air that you take the finger from the nozzle and you create propulsion. Trust. That's what we are doing. We are not using the same laws of physics to fight the laws of physics. We are going around the laws of physics in order to bend them. But we are not using the same principles. And that's, look, for me, is utter ridiculous that people believe that aliens come here with jet engines. It's just ridiculous. You cannot travel space with jet engines. It just doesn't work. And that's why we don't go anywhere, because we're limited to a source of fuel instead of illimited energy that is everywhere. So if you are interstellar race, either you use quantum locking and you pass, quantum coupling, and you pass from one place to the other instantaneously, or you have a means of propulsion that uses the same laws of nature. Otherwise, you cannot do it.
Or some hybrid between. I think there's so much more possibility for transcending dimensions than there is for transcending, faster than light barriers when it comes to conventional travel. I mean, it's got to be
That's
unconventional because I don't think matter is necessarily fixed at this scale, you know?
that's exactly what contact is. Contact is a sphere placed in a how do you call those things that grab stuff? A ginch? No, how you call it?
A winch? I don't know.
A winch or something like that. Those big things to build the buildings are very narrow and then have
Crane.
that
It's a
crane.
crane. That's
So
a
it's a
gant.
crane grabbing a sphere, and beneath the sphere is a net to catch the sphere. But
In
between these two
between
things, you
two pillars, right?
right. So in between this, all you have to do is to create a a disturbance, created purposeful disturbance in the fabric of reality. So they use frequency by the rotation of magnets to create a place that is beyond uh, physicality. Inside that nucleus of that energy, according to certain specifications that I can't remember right now, when the ball is dropped, all we see is the ball dropping into the net. But
It
to the
didn't work.
person that is inside the ball, right,
It
when it
works.
goes to that, it disappears in time. It goes somewhere. And that's the discrepancy between the 18 hours of static recorded that were never divulged. He said, this is a book for anyone that's thinking that I'm talking about something real. This is the book Contact by Carl Sagan. So she had to fight in order to realize that she was not crazy, that she didn't hallucinate, because there were 18 hours of static recorded. What was instantaneous for cameras and human eyes was 18 hours for the person that was inside the capsule, because they break these brains of reality. That's what these people from
It This reminds me of another Buddhist concept in that theme of the book, um, in referencing the bardo and reality. The question might come up: is this real, or is it a figment of my mind? And the answer is both. And
exactly.
how can it be both? Yep, that's it. That's the best we got.
That's why some people get bruised by falling in dreams. You are muted again.
That's the perfect lead-in for what I had to present. You just did it. Thank you. So I did a little bit of study into the two ravens of Odin, and I thought it made an interesting dichotomy, like the two pillars sort of intersecting along these specific lines. I know a lot of people don't necessarily agree with the exact definitions that they give for the mind and the will, but this is what I got off Wikipedia, so I'm sorry about that. So Hugin being the mind, we talk about care, we talk about motivation, urge, wonder,
Can I ask,
curiosity.
what do people argue with? Do they argue the will idea, or
Well, I think there are other translations, but these two ravens, they were the mythological ravens belonging to Odin who would fly around the world. And they were mentioned here. It says, Hugin and Mugen fly each day over spacious earth. I fear for Hugin that he come not back. Yet more anxious I am for Munin. And so these are
So these were the Palantir of the time.
right, indeed. This is how
two poles
Odin saw the
of the
whole
mind
world.
itself?
Right. So Odin would be looking through other people's eyes to see what they're doing, right? Because that's the idea of the mind and the will. He can see through these things. And so in essence, that would be his place, is behind, the observer, right? And this is sort of the connection or the hookup between that and everybody on Earth. So if you're talking about just the straight translations, that's kind of what it says, is because it's implying it with the names of these creatures. So,
And it's like the individual empowerment and powers in flight, right? It's like the individual tools of creation and will and
Yeah, but in this case, to the use of a single being for his
yes,
own
yeah.
purposes.
I look at it as the single being central to those pillars, right? Like Odin is, he's not even the boss of the birds, but the birds do his thing, whatever he wants.
right, it's the angelic concept. It's the idea that maybe this agency that we're experiencing here on this planet is being projected back to something else that can be witnessed, And if you think about it, that's the idea of the Akashic. That's the idea of this sort of energy web of perception that we sort of operate on and we view as being separate, but it's all taking place inside of our heads. So I have this other one that I like to go to. Let me see. Here we go. So we have a mental image. And inside of that mental image, let's say it's somebody else, we also have their perception of us. And we're thinking about what they're thinking about us.
This reminds me of little doubt, little awakening. No doubt, no awakening. Or wait, excuse me, it starts off great doubt, great awakening. Little doubt, little awakening. No doubt, no awakening. So if we're always focused on this projected mental image, we're usually wrong. Doubt that every once in a while. Sorry to interrupt, Hillis.
No, but I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's always in this dichotomy of us, how we view ourselves, how other people view us. It's a constant rotation around this idea of dualism as we live our lives.
It's the being naked, right? They found themselves to be naked in the and were ashamed and covered themselves. I just wonder what did they cover, because considering that it could be a finger or a nose that was obscene, right? There was no concept. Why did they choose those parts to cover? Right there and there, I see some inconsistencies because why did they cover the sexual parts, right? So was there a preconception of what was wrong and right, or was it all given by the apple of knowledge, right? Is this awareness of I am here to the world? So my point here is when we were talking, what I was seeing is this first realization that I'm naked before the world, that people will look at me and will judge me. So I have to constantly be looking to what their judgment is. And the problem is that the other person is also doing the same thing, looking to the other instead of only judging, is also judging himself how the other is judging him. And so this never ends, right? And what it becomes a world of appearances, of emptiness, of shadows, as we've been talking before.
The world of appearances and the world of opinions. That's basically the difference. Is we're all kind of living in this holographic matrix. So when we have these perceptions, it does in essence vibrate into reality because this is the pattern we end up living by. And I think just by getting outside of your head a little bit and maybe thinking about things in terms of yourself and the other being more like Hugin and Mugen, seeing the other person as being a manifestation of yourself in a way takes that otherness out of the equation. And I know in a lot of practices, magic particularly, you have to remove that border so that you can, correctly operate the spell. Is that possible? I think you have to take yourself outside of the normal space time and start to view things differently. But I think it is possible to do that. And I think that's one of the ideas behind maybe mind control is people can put themselves in your eyes, put themselves in your shoes. And it's not until years later that you realize somebody else was living through you just through their words. You know, I mean, these are powerful concepts, I think.
Well, I believe that there are a clear distinction between people that rule or influence and people that follow. And that comes back to that responsibility that no one wants to have, not even for their own lives. Because if anything bad happened, it was the government, it was the bank, it was the boss, it was my wife, it was my children, it was my father. It was never me. So people don't realize that once we leave the control of our fathers, there is, to me, that's where the distinction between free will and determinism happened, because you are building this experience while being held by these elders until a certain point, and then all of a sudden that disappears and you are left with only determinism. And that's an awful thing to face, because you are now responsible for everything that happens to you, even if you are on the street and get mugged or killed, or in a car accident and the guy came against you and you have no responsibility on the matter. You have the responsibility because you took the choice of leaving the house and pick up the car at that time. Oh no, I had to go to that place. Yeah, but you took the choice to go there.
I was going to mention Hiram Abiff, who is accosted and they try to rob and beat him up. We just mentioned that. And I was going to mention that he overcomes these three ruffians, right? And there's like this idea of the Trinity aspect of someone overcoming becoming the thrice great, if you will. Um, and the three ruffians are associated with fear and superstition, and those are pretty concrete. And the third, there's different notations and points on what the third ruffian represents, but I think the best way to sum it up is the cultural ruffian, right? Because these fears and these superstitions are pretty obvious, and then there's these cultural influences that have us tag along and react, act again in
The mob.
it's mob like, and it's really unthinking. And an example of this is something that I was just discussing, the cultural idea of the world's oldest profession. That is an insult to womanhood. It's not really well thought out at all if you scrutinize and are skeptical about it. And it's causes
According to
men
my
immense
research, it was
inconvenience.
actor. The prostitution took
Actor's
place.
an interesting one. Over the centuries, there was various discussions and realizations as to what it might be. A sailor and tailor were other professions. Nurse, I like nurse because we were all nursed somehow as
How
kids.
about
Either
hunter?
a hunter cannot excel at hunting without knowing that he has a healer at home. You can't learn how to hunt, and nor can you take on a bull or a bear or anything without knowing you have a healer at home. That's the difference between a dog and a human hunter, that they know they have care, that a scratch is meaningless. A bear knows that a scratch could turn into an infection and he could die. Total different level of confrontation. The healer was what engaged our hunting capability, I would put forth, and even civilization itself, because you really have no courage without the healer at home. With the healer at home, you and someone else can take on a bear, no problem. You can take on a herd of whatever. And that's how humans have looked at the world, with the nurse at home. Otherwise, you're just as screwed as a bear without that help.
So imagine that you are a community living 15,000 years ago. Okay.
That's what I was just pointing out.
Okay. So you are faced in the community that there is this person, male or female, that sees things and perhaps has a better connection to the akashic network, or uses sorts of psychotropes that allows her to, or him to, have better wisdom or whatever. How long would it take a community to say, look, oh wise one, lead us? So perhaps the shaman that is also the healer, perhaps that's the first profession. Although they were not paid, but perhaps that's the first
I
profession.
believe the nurse. That's what I'm saying. The nurse was the first profession,
Yeah.
or healer, or shaman. But
Yeah.
literally, the nurse, by way of being nursed at the bosom or nursed in the nursery, we're all dependent on that from the get-go. But also in the very hunter tribal setting, there's no way that we could even get to that point where we're successfully hunting for a group without the healer, right? I mean, but you're right. Hunter is a very good point, Ricardo. And I'm
That you destroyed ultimately, and I thank you for that.
No, only because I've thought about it. Hunter is really the best answer besides the nurse.
Teacher comes before the healer.
Yeah. Good point.
And the spirits
Good
were the
point.
first.
But certainly we can agree it's not the prostitute, right? That much we can definitely agree on.
I don't know what
that's
they were
interesting.
doing in their free time. I mean,
yeah, but but the teacher, if you go to, for instance, the guy that started medicine in the Chinese tradition, the guy that experimented more than 10,000 plants on himself, he was not teaching.
He was not taught.
Yeah. So these people make themselves.
I just think we could. The point is arguable. Certainly, a teacher is a really valid argument, Atlas. But I just think nurse ultimately wins because we're all taken care of, right? We're all dependent for quite a long time on the nurse or nursery for at least 5 years until we can maybe feed ourselves back in the day, possibly if we're feral, right?
Well, I like your idea. I think it all wraps together into the idea that we take a piece of nature with us, and the medicine bag and the idea of the place that you call home, having a piece of that wherever you go. I think that's kind of the whole thing between the adventurer and the healer. It's always sort of like that's your heart bag. That's the thing that you're bringing with you into battle. it's not just a thing that you get beat up and then come home to. It's something that you take with you as well.
Yeah, good point.
Well, wow, we're on 2 hours. What do
Yeah,
you say we wrap it up here,
yeah,
guys?
It's a
sure.
good point to wrap up. That was awesome.
Thank you for everyone that stayed with us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. You guys were great in the audience, and
Yeah, great messages.
Yeah.
absolutely. Go ahead and tell them where they can find you guys if they don't know already.
Go on, Ethan.
You can find me on all the usual suspects of social media. Frequently writing articles, and I have a few books on Amazon. And appreciate everybody's communication and support, and appreciate you guys.
Thank you. So, as I said, you can find me at Ricard Calvary1 at X. And look for the links that are there. You'll find about 100 articles already written and lots of material on my page. So, videos, books, articles, anything. Thank you.
All right, and I'm the Headless Giant. You can find me shit talking on X, and I've got a mailbag episode. If you guys get those emails in there, I can read them on Thursday. So, Headless Giant podcast at gmail.com. Thank you very much for coming. See you again next time.